Okay, so for video number 2, we're going to try to get through page number 2 and number 3, and we'll see if we can do it. So let's look at this first one. So question number 7. So in question number 7, they're asking me to find the zeros of the polynomial and put it into factor form. Well, finding the zeros are pretty easy. We just look for the x-intercepts. So right there, right there, right there, right there. So, and writing them in factor form isn't too bad. That'd be x minus 3, or whoops, x plus 3, because we always take the opposite. That'd be x plus 2. That'd be x minus 1, and that would be x plus 4, or minus 4. There we go. So we have all of these zeros, and again, when you plug them in, they're always opposite. There's only one thing we have to check, which is the degree of these things. If you look at this goes straight through, so it makes a line, that makes sense. This goes straight through, it makes a line, that makes sense. This goes straight through, makes a line, that makes sense. This, this one, U's. If I could draw the U shape better. But there we go. That one U's. So if it U's, we know that this is a second degree. So this is what it is in factored form. Just make sure you look to see if it U's or goes straight, because if it U's, you're going to have to say that it's a squared term. Let's look at number 8. On number 8, now we have to do the graphing. So we're in the opposite spot. When we're having to do this graphing, again, we want to graph our points. If you ever have an x in front and want to know what its 0 is, it's 0. Negative 1 would be positive 1 for our 0, and positive 2 would become negative 2, because again, we're trying to make these things 0. The next thing that we have to do is try to figure out how the lines are kind of going to go through everything. So the first thing we need to do is know, does this line start up or does this line start down? And so because this is on the negative side, we're going to plug in a negative number. Well, if you just plug a negative number into here, you get a negative. If you plug a negative number and then you square it, it becomes positive. And if you plug a negative number into here, it's going to be negative. So when you look at this, a negative times a positive times a negative is going to end up giving you a positive. So this thing is going to start up here. I'm going to go down to this point. And then I look what shape this makes, and this makes a line. So it's going to go straight through. I look what shape this makes, and that makes a line. So we go straight through. I look what shape this makes. Oh, it's a quadratic. So it's going to U. And there would be my graph for number 8. So for this next one, we want to do long division, so I'm just going to set up this. And the reason we have to do long division on this one is because there's a number in front of your x. Whenever you have that, you can't do synthetic division, no matter how much you want to, because the problem is you don't know what you would be timesing it by, because this factor would be a fraction. And timesing things by fractions is never fun. So we're going to do just normal long division. Again, it's going to work out just like we did before, where we want to make our first terms become the same. So when I think about what, I can multiply this to make it 2x cubed, bx squared. And again, what you do over to the side is you say, well, x squared times 2x plus 3 would give me 2x cubed plus 3x squared. And then when we plug it in here, we flip the signs because it's subtraction. That's going to become 2x squared. And then negative x is going to drop down. Again, we want these things to match, which becomes really easy because that would just be plus x. Because if you multiply by an x, it would match. I'm not going to do this multiplication out to the side, but you would see that you get 2x squared, minus 2x squared minus 3x that's going to give you negative 4x. And then we drop down the negative 7. Whoops. I'm going to just redo that really quick. Now we need to figure out what's going to make this work out. We're going to need a negative 2 to get this to match. And the reason why, when you think about it, is you're going to do negative 2 times 2x plus 3. And you're going to get negative 6x minus 6. But again, we flip the signs. And when we flip this, whoops, not negative. Can't multiply. You're going to get negative 4x minus 6. And again, when you flip the signs, it's going to be a positive 4x plus 6. That will cancel out, and I'll get a negative 1, which is my remainder. So we would have a remainder of negative 1. And that would be my answer. You could ask yourself, is this a factor? And the answer is no, it's not a factor because we have a remainder. Okay? So let's try the next one. Okay, so 10 has 2 parts. Let's start with A. Again, if you look at this, this is a cubic, so you might go, oh, dang it, we can't do anything because it's a cubic. But if you notice, they all share an x. So the first thing I notice is, since they all share an x, I can factor out an x, which would give me this. Now, if you look at this, you should go, this thing doesn't factor. And because this thing doesn't factor, instead of factoring it to solve it, we're going to use the quadratic formula. Before I do that, I do know one answer though. X would equal 0, so that's one answer. And now we have to find our other answer using the quadratic formula. If you remember what the quadratic formula is, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, which 2a would be 2 times 2, or 4. Again, I don't need you to solve this whole mess. I just need to see whether it is negative or positive inside that square root. And we would find that inside this square root, it would be, well, 4 times 2 will give you 8 times negative 1 would be a positive 8. So that'd be 1 plus 8 over 4. Oh, and that's actually going to work out pretty nicely. That's going to be 9 over 4, which you could say that's negative 1 plus or minus 3 over 4, which then this could simplify to 2 over 4 and negative 4 over 4, which that would be 1/2, and this would be negative 1. So we actually do get 3 really nice answers here. So I now just found that I have a mistake on my answer key, because when I did this, I didn't plug a negative 1 into here. So I'm going to have to fix that in a minute, but that's okay. Okay, let's do part B then. Okay, so the next one, let me fix some of that. The next one looks like this. Plus 18x cubed minus 27x squared. What you should notice about this one is they all share an x squared. So we will factor that out, and we'll get x squared on the outside, and on the inside we'll get negative 3x squared. Oh, they even share more than that, because not only do they share an x squared, but they also share a negative 3. So let's pull that out too. So we'll pull the negative 3 out. That would just leave us with x squared. That would leave us with minus 6x. And that would leave us with plus 9. Well, that's going to work out really, really nicely, because I actually can factor this, because x minus 3 and x minus 3 multiply together to give you 9, but add together to give you negative 6. Well then, the zeros of this become really easy. This one's 0, this one's 3, and this one's 3. So that would be my answer to 10b. Try the next page. For problem number 11, the first part is to find the missing root, which is nice that they let you know that you had a missing root. You should just know that you have a missing root right here, because if you have an i's have to come in pairs. So it's because they come from the quadratic formula, and the quadratic formula gives you plus or minuses. So if I see plus 3i, I also have to see minus 3i. And so these are our three roots, and this was our missing root. Well, now we're just going to write this in standard form, which means we have to write these as factors. So I'm going to say x minus 5 plus 3i. I'm going to write this one next to it, so x minus 5 minus 3i. And then we're going to write this one as x minus 6. After that, we're going to multiply these out. This one is a little bit annoying because you have to multiply all three terms, so it's going to get a little bit messy, but shouldn't be too bad. For this, we're going to get x squared minus 5x minus 3ix minus 5x plus 25 plus 15i plus 3ix minus 15i, and then plus 9i squared. And I haven't forgot about this term. It's down there with it, but we have to deal with all of these terms first. So let's see what's going to cancel. That's a negative 3i, and that's a positive 3i, so that goes away. That's a positive 15i, and that's a negative 15i, so that goes away. These are like terms, so we can combine this and this. And this, even though it doesn't look like it's going to become something nice, we know what I squared is. I squared is equal to negative 1, because I is the square root of negative 1. So if you squared that term, the square and the square root are going to cancel out. And so that's where we get negative 1 from that. So when we write this down, we're going to get x squared minus 10x plus 25. That is going to be plus 9, because I made a slight mistake there. That wasn't a plus 9i, that was a minus 9i, because 3 times negative 3 is a minus, so that's going to be plus 9. And then we have x minus 6 right here. When we write this down, we're going to get x squared minus 10x plus 34. And then we're going to have to multiply this over here. When we multiply this over here, we're going to end up distributing. And when we distribute, we're going to get x cubed minus 6x squared minus 10x squared minus 60x plus 34x minus, and I don't know what that is off the top of my head, 204. Whoops. It's moving around on its own now. Okay, now we combine these things. So they're going to combine and they're going to combine, and we will get our final answer as x cubed minus 16x squared minus 26x minus 204. And that's that in standard form. I have one last video that will kind of cover problems 12 through the end.